Comet The Colt of Steel, Chapter 2, Part 2. Congratulations, Mrs. Apple. It's a filly. A beautiful, healthy filly. A wave of relief washed over Pear Butter as Dr. Scalpel cut the umbilical cord and handed off the newborn to her.
She's safe. Oh, thanks, Celestia, she's safe.
The newborn filly nuzzled up against her mother's neck as Pear Butter took her into her arms. With her pale yellow coat and red mane, she was the spitting image of her father.
Hello, my little apple.
Pear Butter smiled as her daughter opened her eyes for the very first time. Have you decided on a name for her yet? One of the doctors asked her. Pear Butter looked into her daughter's eyes, a fusion of red and orange that reminded her of the autumn harvest in full bloom.
Apple Bloom,
she stated.
Her name shall be Apple Bloom.
Suddenly, Pear Butter heard the EKG beating faster. She looked down and let out a horrified scream as she saw the sheets of her gurney turning to a deep red. Oh no. No, she's hemorrhaging. Okay, get me an IV of blood and a hemostat potion stat! Dr. Scalpel cried out. Pear Butter felt a shiver of cold run down her spine. Her worst fear was coming true. The sudden trauma was too much for her newborn, who began wailing loudly as the surgeons fought valiantly to save Pear Butter's life. Nurse the foal to postnatal care for cleanup immediately!
Right away, doctor!
The nurse gently took Apple Bloom from her mother's arms and wrapped her in a blanket. Her heart rate is dropping. Where's the hemostat potion? Pear Butter's vision began to blur as she felt the life draining out of her. It was getting really cold.
Here it is, Dr. Scalpel, here!
One of the surgeons handed the potion over to him. He wasted no time removing the seal and cap. I need you to drink this, okay? He held her mouth open with his hoof and poured the potion quickly down. She swallowed the first few gulps of it, no problem. However, she began to gag as the last third of it ran down her throat. She's gagging! She's gagging! Tilt her head back! Dr. Scalpel called out to one of his assistants. The assistant surgeon did as instructed, holding Pear Butter's head back as the doctor poured the last of the hemostat down her throat. Stay with us, Mrs. Butter! I need you to stay with us! Pear Butter's breathing began to slow down as another shiver ran through her body.
Bright Mac, promise you'll tell him. Tell him I'm sorry.
The words choked out of her mouth in heavy, labored gasps of air as she gripped the doctor's hoof tightly. She's going into shock! Dr. Scalpel cried. Find Dr. Nimbus! Tell him to get a thundercloud in here post-haste!
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, every pony. I fought my hardest for you all. But I guess it wasn't enough. I love you all so much. Take care of each other.
Applejack held onto her father's foreleg tightly. It was nightfall, long past time for ponies her age to be in bed. But Applejack could not sleep. Not when her mother and baby sister were both sick. She wanted to believe that they would be okay. That the doctors would make her feel better, and they could all go home as one big happy family. However, when Dr. Scalpel finally did walk out of the waiting hall, he wore a grim expression on his face. Mr. Mac, I'm afraid we have some bad news, he said. Applejack felt her heart drop like a stone into the pit of her stomach. There were complications during the cesarean. Your daughter's gonna be alright, but I'm afraid we couldn't save your wife. And just like that, Applejack fell apart. Every dam, every wall, every fiber of her being shattered like porcelain as she collapsed into a heap against her father's barrel. Bright Mac looked down at his daughter, who was sobbing so hard that part of him thought she might have a panic attack. He looked over at his mother, Granny Smith, and she had set Apple Comet down in his bassinet. She was now holding Big Macintosh's head on her shoulder as the large colt cried his eyes out. Tears flowed down her wrinkled cheeks as she patted Big Macintosh on the back with her hoof. I'm terribly sorry for your loss. We did everything that we could do under the circumstances. Your daughter is waiting in the maternity ward, if you want to go see her. Brightmac looked up at the doctor with heavy hurt in his eyes. Despite that, he still held on to his composure. Thank you, doctor, he replied, simply before turning down to his children. AJ? Mac? His children looked up at him with red eyes. You two want to go see your new sister? Neither one of them said a word. Look, I know you're hurting right now. I'm hurting. And y'all can be sure that Granny's hurting too, but your ma wouldn't want you to break down on her like this. She wanted you to be strong for her, for me, for your granny, for Apple Comet, for your baby sister, but most importantly, for each other. Now the apples are a family, and what does family do? Applejack sniffled and wiped her eyes. Family sticks together. No matter what happens. The words choked out of her mouth. Yup, Big Mac said as he climbed down slowly from his grandmother's lap. Bright Mac smiled softly as the Apple clan proceeded to pull itself together. That's the spirit. Now come on, let's not keep your new sister waiting. So, which one is she, Pa? Applejack asked as she and Big Mac peered through the window into the nursery. Foals of all different races and colors lay in their bassinets, and some slept peacefully, while some others fussed and cried. She's over there, Sugar Cube, Bright Mac said as he pointed over to a light yellow filly with a red mane. That's your new baby sister. Apple Bloom. Applejack looked in awe at the little foal as she tossed and yawned in her crib. Apple Bloom. Her baby sister's name was Apple Bloom. Applejack felt a feeling of warmth rush through her, stifling the pain in her heart. She still fought to hold back her tears, but this time she felt different, besides grief. It was joy. It was joy for the new life Pear Butter had brought into this world. It didn't really erase the sense of loss, but maybe, just maybe, it might just make that burden a little easier to bear. So, when can we take him home, Pa? Tomorrow morning, he simply said. There was still much to be done. In addition to filling out the necessary paperwork, there was the task of making Pear Butter's funeral preparations, as well as notifying the rest of the family. Bright Mac felt his heart sink deep into his chest. He was a stallion of few words and even fewer emotions, but the thought of having to bury the love of his life, along with the blame he placed on himself for her, that weighed heavy on his heart. He'd done a good job keeping a straight face for his family's sake, but deep down he felt like bawling, like a foal. Son, I know you're hurting right now. You might be able to hide it from the kids, but you can't hide it from me. Bright Mac looked down to see his mother standing by him, bassinet in hoof. I can't believe she's gone, he said. I'm gonna miss her too, son. We all will. A mare like Pear Butter comes about maybe once in a lifetime. I guess I've just been keeping a strong front for the kids' sake. You can't blame yourself for what happened. She knew the risk, but she wanted to bring that foal into the world out of love for you and us. In the end, it was her decision. Bright Mac sighed and slowly removed his hat. He reached inside to his hat and pulled out a letter. To my loving husband and wonderful children. Bright Mac placed the hat back on his head as he looked at the words gracing the envelope. I'm not gonna lie, these next few months, they're gonna be hard for us, but you need to be strong, for all of our sakes. That's what Pear Butter would have wanted. Granny Smith placed her hoof across her son's back and rubbed it gently.
"She wrote it the night before we left the hospital,"
he said softly.
Told me if something happened to her, to open it. Then she smiled and said to keep it under my hat. Well, aren't you gonna open it?
Brightmack looked down at his mother's face and the white foal in her arms. He thought back to Pear Butter's threat to move back to Van Hoover if he sent Apple Comet to an orphanage. She was 8 months pregnant, and she insisted on taking in a stray in the middle of the night. It was like Granny had said. She had whipped him good.
"Applejack! Big Macintosh!"
The Apple siblings turned around to face their father. To their amazement, they actually saw tears fall down his snout.
"There's something I want to share with you." To my loving husband and wonderful children, by the time you read this letter, I will no longer be with you. It saddens me greatly that I must leave you behind, but to know that you are the best family a man could ask for. To my loving husband, Brightmack, you have been the love of my life since we first met. The years we've spent together have been the best years of my life. You were a gentle husband and a loving father, and I'll know you'll continue to be. Don't blame yourself for what happened to me. It was my choice to have foals, and I'll never regret it. Being your wife and mother to our children is something I would never trade for anything. Don't mourn me forever, but please, lay me to rest and move on, for our children's sake. To my mother-in-law Gertrude, thank you for a wonderful son who has given me the happiest years of my life. I know that we haven't started off on the right hoof, but I wouldn't have anyone else for a mother-in-law. Take care of my husband and kids for me, will you? And finally, thanks for all the cooking lessons. As you always said, the way to a stallion's heart is through his stomach. To my son Big Macintosh, you are the spitting image of your father. Strong, reliable, humble, and gentle. Keep up your mathematics studies and help your father run things around the farm. I know you'll make some pony special very happy one day. Oh, and keep those stallions away from your sisters when you're not keeping the mares away from you. Know that I'll always love you. To my daughter Applejack, my heart breaks that I will not get to watch you grow up, but I know you'll make a fine young mare someday. You're honest, dependable, understanding, if not a bit stubborn, work on that. I know you'll go on to do great things, but never forget an apple mare is always humble. Take good care of your siblings, and I know I'll always love you. To my newborn daughter, by the time you read this letter, I will be gone for many years, though I could only hold you in my arms for a short time. Know that you've made proud to be your mother. No matter where your path takes you in life, know that I will be with you in spirit. Listen to your pa and siblings. They know what's best. Finally, to my son, Apple Comet, though you were not a child of my womb, I love you as my own flesh and kin. By the time you come of age, you might notice many differences from other ponies like you, or maybe none at all. Regardless of who you are or where you came from, know that I will always love you, and this family loves you, and you'll always have a home on this farm. It is with great sadness that I must leave you all behind. I shall miss you, and no doubt will miss me, but just remember the good times we've had together, and the love and the good times we all shared together. And someday, we shall meet again. Love your wife, daughter-in-law, and mother, Pear Butter.